Those are the only requests I had to speak on the definitional sections. Members, let's walk through these, and then we're going to return to some of the reduced risk sections that we delayed earlier. Following our practices, members, if you would go, please, back to page 14. And unless a member wants to make all the changes made, expanding, I don't know, Mr. Fiorini, maybe the way to do it is to see if we can get a motion on all the changes that have been discussed, incorporating the motion that's currently on the table. I think, Mr. Stevens, does that sound procedurally right to you? Possible? Okay. Is there a motion, Mr. Johnston? Okay. Yes. All right. So to approve the changes identified under the definition section starting on page 14, and include within your motion the motion that Mr. Fiorini had made regarding the date changes for the near-term water transfer completion of study by all the various agencies of 2016 and 2017 in the discussed section. Okay. I think, Don?
I want to speak to the motion, because I look at the comments on rulemaking. I guess I haven't been able to find in the couple hundred pages here the comments as it relates to on page 16 of taking out. What were they? So could someone either direct me to those pages, or we got a motion now on the floor, but
in terms of the designation? Yeah, actually, I happen to have it here. It is ironically from the in-delta comments we received.
Okay.
Come from two agencies with whom folks here have been affiliated. The city of Sacramento actually objected to that. The city of Sacramento was one of the agencies that objected to that. They felt that by setting forth numerous strategies without explaining specifically how these strategies relate to achievement of the co-equal goals, that was a criticism that they did that, and it didn't assist in interpreting or further clarifying the statutory definition, and it suggested that at a minimum it should be removed from the definition section or eliminated entirely from the regulatory language. Another agency that repeated this comment actually was, ironically, the county of Sacramento.
Okay.
And in its letter...
I had their letter, but I didn't see that piece in here. I saw it.
Yeah, in their letter...
draft letter.
They said there's no linkage to actual implementation of the co-equal goals, and the strategies identified as protecting or enhancing the values of the Delta are conceptual and undefined. You know, what's meant, for example, by encouraging recreation and tourism, and what performance measure or standard or criteria is being adopted. And so I think in both cases we saw criticisms that asked for a great deal more definition than we had provided here. And so rather than spending considerable time trying to identify performance measures, as the county of Sacramento had suggested, or further detailing these strategies and linking them to other aspects of the program, we thought that more clarity could be provided just by going with the shorter definition that was included in the Delta Vision Task Force recommendations. And of course the law refers us to the Vision Task Force's report as for guidance, so that's always feels like a safe place to retreat if we are looking for a way to resolve the matter.
So just taking the criticism from Sacramento County, so for the criticism of lack of detail, rather than provide more detail, we take it out. I understand that, but I wasn't really saying that these were necessarily counter to making it clear. I understand the city of Sacramento may be a little more definitive in their comments, but and again, I certainly reserve the right to disagree even with that. I think that they provide some context. Yeah. I mean, I appreciated Mr. Zuckerman's comments, but it just, and very frankly, I don't think it's negative to have them in there. That's my feeling on it. And the motion is to delete them. I guess you delete them and move them to the Delta Plan somewhere into the text. Is that what you're doing?
They are the core strategies that the Delta Plan outlines in terms of organizing its recommendations and policies.
Okay,
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll offer this and see where it goes. I would offer that unless there's some other reason besides the comments you received that you wouldn't, that make the rulemaking vague, I would amend the motion on the floor, offer a substitute motion that we include or retain the language. Retain the language is under 3 on page 16. That's redlined.
Randy?
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. So this is to make a change in the main motion to include what is redlined on this.
To retain
In
it.
my copy, purple lined. Okay. Does this mean I get to go back and throw in all the language that you guys forced me to take out of the...
No.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Comment? Patrick?
So the motion would be to include all those.
Yeah,
struck
the struck
in
language
3.
appearing on page 16 would be reinserted in this. And it's the...
Yeah, just retain their.
I'm sorry, to retain the language. That'll cause other little adjustments in the...
Maybe to Dan, on E, that provision, where does that come from?
These are the headings that we use to organize the Delta Plan's portrayal of the policies and recommendations in the Delta's Place chapter of the plan.
You mean that whole phrase is a heading?
Yeah, I'd have to pull the plan up.
No, I mean...
But I believe so, yeah. It's just, we organize the plan under these...
Yeah, this is a chapter in the plan. These are the subheadings, I think, in that chapter that describe the recommended policies and/or recommendations that were considered by the staff of relevant to help achieve Delta's place. And I think they're in the exact order that they've appeared in a couple of versions of the Delta plan. Of course, here's a question. Designate the Delta as a special place worthy of national and state attention is really a declaration.
Right.
It is, and that, when these guys were arguing with me, they said, well, wait, that's not a regulation.
So here's my question, which I don't want to dwell on too long because I probably am asking it 2 years too late. So. But all the language in the statute and everything else speaks of preserving the Delta and its unique characteristics, and those have been consistent over a long period of time back to the Delta Protection Act of agriculture, wildlife habitat, recreation. And that says it, but in E, it says Delta economy that includes a mix of agriculture, tourism, recreation, commercial, and other industries. Is it pretty broad, isn't it? Other industries, or you could say any industries, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think when we were discussing this, I think, and as the way we're rolling this up into these strategies, we derived a lot of our information from analyses of the Delta, and not just the primary zone. And so that includes the shoreline industries in Contra Costa, the refineries and the other heavy industry there. It would include the areas in Stockton and West Sacramento that are in the Delta, and include those kinds of diverse uses. And those jobs and job sites are one of the ways that people think about the Delta, if that's how they happen to interact with it. They live or work in those communities where those activities are prevalent.
Well, you have cities in the Delta, right? Stockton is one, right? Large part of urbanized Stockton is so. Is making more of Stockton in the Delta a a goal of the Delta Plan?
Well, no, it's not. And maybe what we want to do with that, if I look at the two policies that are part of that, the heading on this section of the Delta Plan is merely sustain a vital Delta economy. And the recommendations are related to ports and the energy facilities in Delta. And we all know about the gas wells and the wind energy on the
Right, because they're necessarily linked to the Delta and the water resource itself.
Yeah.
Residential and commercial neighborhoods, there's nothing unique about them. They can go anywhere. Some of them are in the Delta.
Maybe would it better capture your point of view if we just said sustain a vital Delta economy?
Well, I think I want to consult with Don on this. It includes a mix of agriculture, tourism, recreation, and related industries and commercial establishment, something like that. It's the commercial and other industries suggests it's pretty wide open, and anything that makes money is good because it's good for the economy.
I would just say, Patrick, I think, again, related commercial and industry, maybe you go back and wordsmith that.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I'm okay with that. I think, again, to try to capture the flavor, and I think it's a good refinement, Pat. I would concur with that.
Mr. Fiorini.
Just a general comment. I don't think this is in the definition section, and it really isn't a definition. But since these are subtitles taken from the Delta Plan, that's correct?
Sort of. General, yes.
Okay. So if we have a problem with this, then we have a problem with the Delta Plan. I understand why the county and the city of Sacramento probably would view these as not necessary. But I also understand Don's position. He is our point guy on the Delta, and if it's important to him, I don't think it takes anything away from. And with the changes that you've suggested, I think we should support Don's wishes.
Okay.
But I'm okay wordsmithing that a little bit. That's fine.
Okay, on substitute amendment, starting with Mr. Johnston.
Fiorini, aye.
Ugh, aye.
What was that?
Eisenberg, aye.
Natoli, aye.
Now, to return to the ones where you excluded my language.
Oh, look at the time.
Yeah, right.
There's that legislator coming
Okay. All right, members, we have the motion before us, including Supervisor Natoli's amendment, which has just been made. Any further questions, comments, discussion? All right, on the main motion, starting with Mr. Johnston.
Fiorini, aye.
Eisenberg, aye.
Natoli, aye.
Okay. Members, for the definitional stuff, starting on page 14, we have 4-0, 1 abstention, and one absent. And that is approved as amended. Now, let's return, please. I think we just have 3 remaining items. Isn't that correct, Mr. Ray?
Yes, and why don't we return
ERP 2, is it?
Page 12.
No, I'm sorry. It's ERP 4.
No, it's.
No,
I
I'm sorry.
believe
We
we're
got
at
that.
RRP2 on page 12.
Page 12. Okay. Members, go to page 12, if you would, please. Page 12. Okay. RRP2, left top. Mr. Ray.
Yes, this was the question that we began discussing yesterday and decided to set aside to consider overnight. Again, a staff's recommendation in response to the criticism that the 200-year flood elevation, in response to the comments that the 200-year flood elevation wouldn't be something that would be easily calculated for the rural parts of the Delta where this regulation would apply, was to instead use the 100-year base flood elevation plus sufficient additional elevation to protect against the 55-inch sea level rise that's projected by the end of the century. And this seems like a long look. The Delta Plan calls for us to prepare a long-term plan, and we've been thinking about the end of the century. And as I said earlier, 90 years seems a long ways away. And yet we know that the flood control facilities we depend on today, the Central Valley Flood Control Project with the Yola Bypass and the bypasses above it and Shasta Dam, were designed 90 years ago. So it shows the value of looking that far ahead. We've got a letter from the Ocean Protection Commission signed by one of the assistant secretaries for the Natural Resources Agency supporting the staff's recommendation. And I know Peter's had a chance to think a little bit more about how to explain how this might be applied in the Delta, and he's got information if you'd be interested in seeing it.